Jenny Weaver.
Jenny Weaver, there you go. J. Jenny Weaver. She's at Boston College. Um, when I'm thinking about Anabaptists, I'm thinking of a church movement of people with a spiritual movement, of people that recognize that the body of Christ is open to a diverse body of believers who have the opportunity to worship God in a devotional and a diverse variety of ways. And yet, they're decision to be a part of a worshiping community is not something that is forced on them, but something that they have, that we have the freedom to come into community, to be formed and shaped by that community, and also to be strengthened by that community. So that is how I look at it. And then in terms of where its core values is centered in Jesus, and then the core values are discipleship, community, and peace. Those are like the three core values of being in the body. And so even in terms of peace, that is like when if you talk about evangelism, that concept of peace is the foundation. That value of peace is the foundation for evangelism. That I don't come up to Janice and say, well, you're in my town, you have to come to my church, or this is how you should believe, and Janice will turn to you and say, well, that's how you're not going to be for that. That's not how it's going to be. But in that sense of peace, that we can be in a faith community, and that we can journey on a journey together, and walk the path side by side, and still be part of that community. So there's that sense of how we do this is going to really fit into the core of Christian life. So I am looking to ask you, how do we build relationships? I think it's important for the vitality and the revitalization of congregations that vision and vitality come out of the building of relationships within the congregation. That's key, and that's part of why we do the Bible studies that are part of the Bible ministry journey, is working on those relationships. So building relationships within the community, but also building relationships with people that are not a part of our faith community. And so it's a way of being sort of genuine and important. So we are engaged in the life of other people, and that they are engaged in our, and it's not just for the purpose of let's hook you in so you'll become a member of our church, but it's a building of a relationship in order to share our lives with each other, and the opportunity to share our faith with each other and our experiences with each other, regardless of where the other person is at. So building the relationship. And so that's important within the life rhythm of a congregation. Creating space is another piece. And for creating space, it ties into point number one. Do we as a church create relational space, or do we say, no, if you don't have these kind of beliefs and values and understanding, that there is no place for you here? And we're not intimidated by that either. So we're able to create that relational space. The other piece to creating relational space is related to number three, is do we create spiritual space? That we recognize that we're not all at the same place, on the same journey, or anything. It's like, used to have this person in the congregation, and he has a strong BRF influence within his faith understanding. And so we have new people come into the church, and he would come and say, how can these people come into our church? They're not strong, advocates of our peace position. And our response to him was, we know that, but it's a value of our church, and so we invite them into that journey. And then along the way, we invite them to discover and learn how to discover what that value is. And so we recognize that there is some risk in that, because it can reshape, but at the same time, that we have to create that space for that to happen as well.
And so there's that relational space, spiritual space, and then also what's important for a congregation is to have physical space, where fellowship can happen in many different ways. And so those are key pieces. And then 3 is enable the journey. And this is where we as a congregation and as body of Christ have to be intentional about discipleship. In other words, how is it that we invite people into the journey of faith? How do we call them? And how do we form and shape them? And also, how do we send ourselves out? Because that is that's the calling of discipleship. When you look at how Jesus did it, it's transferring a way of life to someone else. And so another way of living, another way of being is that sense in which we do that. So to be able to enable that journey, to be able to enable people to grow and move. And so that means then we're not force-feeding them answers to how they should believe, but we're opening the scriptures up together, and we're exploring together, and we're asking those wild and crazy questions. And so that means that when I'm sitting with my 5th grade group on a Sunday morning, and I'm saying, "What do you think God looks like?" And one of the girls says, "Man, I bet you he's a cutie." I'm okay with that, because she's exploring. Well, what else? And her next comment was, "He must like me," because she comes to church on her own. Her parents live nearby. Her parents are off playing tennis. They don't even drop her off at church. She has to come to church on her own. But she has a sense that God must like her. And maybe even more so, than what some other people do in her life. But there's that openness to explore with her. Then what does that mean to you that God must like you? And so that's an empowering, for a congregation. Seeking direction. And this is where congregations are in the sense of discernment. And it also goes back to creating space. We are in a quick fix, solution-based society, culture, where, who we are. And so if we are to, in a sense, engage and nurture curiosity of faith and who we are, then we also, as a congregation, need to nurture that space to ask, what is God calling us to do and to be? Okay? And do we provide that kind of engagement in the church to do that? Now, our first reaction is we don't have time to do it. And my encouragement would be that, if all possible, let's make the space and try to work in the time to do it. Because in the long run, I don't think it takes us as much time to engage in terms of what is God calling us to do, rather than just floundering in what we think we ought to be doing. And so in that seeking direction, as we're doing that, I don't think we're just sitting and talking to each other, but it means that we need to be sitting and listening to the community around us. Because there's some powerful voices and some insightful voices that God is using through the community to speak to us. And so that connects to receive the cup. And by receiving the cup, we associate that often with communion. And so there is that interaction that no longer do we see the community as, we're able to move to the point where we don't see the community as competition, but that we're able to see the community as an active, engaged partner, and to be able to find those places. There's this church that